Patrick Verkley. I am a broiler and cash crop farmer here in Adelaide Township, Middlesex County. Main types of soils that I farm on here are sort of a heavier clay. We've got Perth clay and Beverly clay type soils here. So our standard farming practices here have been no-till. We've been no-till for pretty much like a quarter century. I have no memory of any tillage happening as a kid here. It just hasn't been something that we've done, and it's been sort of a long-term investment into the soil health. And it's taken 25 years, but we are now really starting to see that benefit for soil drainage, for improved organic matter, and overall just sort of an improved resiliency of the soil. We've had some challenging years as of late, and we've just sort of been patient and got the crops in when they could. We're lucky in the fact that we've got sort of the planter and the sprayer capacity to knock out all of our farms in like a day and a half. Whereas, you know, if you had to be more tight, you couldn't give this ground that amount of time. We have done strip till in the past here, but as of right now, we've sort of moved back just to the no-till, so this year, this is the first year I've grown that this is the second year I've owned this farm, and this year, like the corn, we, on the non-plot areas, averaged about 204 bushels an acre on, you know, heavy clay, tiled at 40 feet with a no-till plant. So my main philosophy with cash cropping is that, like, I'm small. I'm only farming, you know, 50-acre farm here. My dad's got a 100-acre farm. We know we can't just farm like everybody else farms. So, in order to try and make a viable and sustainable business out of our cropping operation, I know we have to investigate what we can do differently. So since coming home from university, I've been trying to explore what we can do to sort of push the bounds of what we're farming. So I've had a few plots over the years, looking at, first year was looking at sort of relay cropping and no-till organic. That kind of went off the rails a little bit. Weeds don't just disappear, so they're always going to be there. Moving on from that, I sort of just took a little bit of a reassessment. Don't try and just make sure, trying to be more measured with how we do it. So the next year I experimented with the sort of a more conventional relay cropping. So planting twin row 30-inch wheat and then planting soybeans in between that. What I was looking to get in that plot was a way to shorten down the crop rotation while maintaining some of the benefits of having wheat in the rotation. And that came from an economic standpoint of, at the time, the economics on corn and soybeans looked a lot better than wheat did. I still liked wheat for what it did for soil health and improving soil health, but really wanted to find a way to bring that in without it having to mean an entire year was taken out of that rotation. So that's kind of what I was experimenting with, and to see, how much can I lower seed inputs? Can I, what can I gain there from that? So looking beyond just that sort of that relay cropping experiment, which I was sort of seeing a lot of discussion on Twitter about 60-inch corn. and it kind of intrigued me. It was sort of an off-the-wall idea in the same way that the relay cropping was. And so I was wanting to see that. And so I started trying to develop, well, what's this going to look like? What's my angle? Seems like there's been a lot of other people that have played with 60-inch corn, but they did it in the same variety as they do the regular corn. They put the same population down, they did the same fertility, they did all of those other things exactly the same. And I think, on the one hand, intuitively, I think I knew that, like, maybe you're not going to get exactly the same yield by planting that far apart. Like, there are sort of limitations there. The other hand is sort of, well, what can you get away with? And I hadn't really thought too much about that until I'd seen Jason Mock's videos and descriptions of what he was trying, and he was just putting unbelievably low populations of corn and getting really amazing yield results out of one plant. So that started to get me wondering, okay, well, if we pull back population way back and reduce our seed input cost and reduce our fertilizer input costs, well, what can we get that plant to do for us? And then what can that, pulling back offer us in return? So when we look at the 60-inch plot that I did this year, it's not even fair to call it a real plot, because it isn't as much a plot as it is a proof of concept. It was grown on ground that had been worked up and broken apart in the process of building this chicken barn that we're sitting in now. That soil needs time to recover. It's had a bulldoze over it, so there's no way you can expect a great crop. The opportunity that offers is that it's not going to do a great crop, so why don't you leverage that and see what you can try. So that's sort of how I came up with where I put it. And so you have to take that with a grain, you have to take the yield results from that proof of concept with a grain of salt to make sure that you're, both being fair to the trial, because you're not giving it the best opportunity, but, just is it even worth doing on your good ground? And, that sort of thought process pulled through the whole plot. So, I'm only doing this plot on like 2.7 acres, and half of that's had bulldozers well over it. So, but it's a chance to sort of see, okay, well, what can this do? My plot area, I've got two plot areas. I had a plot area on the one side of the barn, which was sort of the check at 30-inch of the cover crop mix that got put into the 60-inch corn plot, and then I have the other plot, which was a 60-inch corn plot. The side that was just the 30-inch check, that ground was beat up more, but that, which was at the same population as everything else, planted the same way, same time, just had the detriment of being on bad ground that had been worked up. That plot yielded 115 bushels an acre. So we know that there's a significant decrease there. My plot that I did the 60-inch corn, that had a little bit of better ground, but it still had some that was in that sort of just recovery stage. And that plot ended up doing 136 bushels an acre. And the thing that's interesting there is the fact that it had half the population of corn. It had, whereas the main farm and the other thing had a planted population per acre of 32,000. That 60-inch corn had a population in the area at 16,000. So each plant had, there was way less plants, but each plant was given a lot more opportunity. And that's on the average. And while combining it, what I noticed was watching the yield monitor, there were parts that, right up next to the barn where that bulldozer really moved just everything. It was showing like 60, 70 bushels an acre. But when I got a little bit farther out into the ground that hadn't been worked up as much, and we got had the header set right, I was seeing yields anywhere from 160 to 210. So for me, it's not a hard data point. You can't say that, yeah, I got 200 bushel an acre off that. But what it points to is the potential of that system. And gave the opportunity to just learn and see what this is going to be. So moving forward, I'm going to play with fertilizer rates. Like, what can that be pulled back to? I kind of just stayed the same rate as everything else. So we'll see, what can we pull that back to? What can we pull the seed population back to? Or does it need a little bit more to maximize that? But at what, it's going to be a case of playing with those ratios. And the other factor is going to be the cover crops that come in. And I think that's the other aspect that really I find interesting and really does change the economic equation on the whole system. So in deciding which cover crops I was wanting to put into the 60-inch, I was trying to balance a couple things. So there's the agronomic side, which is what's going to be good for the soil, what's going to be good for improving soil health, improving soil drainage, doing all that good stuff. There's the economic side, like you put some clovers in there, they're going to grow nitrogen, and that we'll touch on that a little bit, but that really does change the equation of whether or not wide row corn makes sense. And then the third one is the opportunity for what it says for the public image of farmers and the environmental message that we want to send. I was sort of maybe just a little bit late to the game in getting my plot organized, and so ended up didn't put any covers in until sort of side dress time. So the tool that I ended up using was the side dresser and cover crop seeder that Cornelison Farms have. It's sort of an APV unit on their side dresser, and it's got Yetter wavy coulters that sort of put that in next to the right next to where the 28% goes in. So what I ended up trying to sort of play with was, okay, there's lots of talk about how do we provide more pollinator habitat for our bees and for our other insects that are out there and are beneficial to the environment as a whole. It's okay, well, I've got this wider thing, you could just plant straight clover, but we could put a bit of a mix in here and we'll see what does that look like. And so that was part of what I was trying to balance. So the mix ended up with, I kind of just called up my cover crop supplier and said, hey, this is kind of what I want to do, what do you think would go there? And so I'd worked with Stefan Zertner here in cover crops, and kind of got he sees a lot, so you talk to him, he kind of just yeah, you probably want some of this, and this is whatever. I'm this is a 3-acre plot, it's just, the mix we ended up with was a sort of a nice 6-way split of trefoil, white clover, fixation Balanza, frosty berm seam, crimson clover, and Phacelia. So there's some in there that are fixing nitrogen, putting into the soil. I'd asked specifically for the Phacelia just because I'd seen what it could look like as sort of a visual, and I thought, you know, it had a really cool piercing blue color to that flower, and it's like, if that could take off, like that's a really cool visual that someone driving down the road would be like, whoa, what is that? That's kind of cool. But so when you come back to the 60-inch plot, we're getting to use half as much seed, potentially less fertilizer. My chemical program was less because I couldn't use a residual because it would kill the cover crop. So it ended up just being sort of straight glyphosate on the corn that was planted. So you reduce your chemical costs, your fertilizer costs, and then you've got wider rows so you can manage your weeds with mowing. So you've reduced your two costs there, and then you've also decreased your fertilizer costs for years down the road. So if you're going like a clover, let's say you fixed 80 to 100 pounds of nitrogen in a year. That's a credit you can carry forward. And so the economics start to really make sense. And if my farm average here on, heavy no-till farm is 204, if I could get to like 185 on that 60-inch corn, like I'm still quite ahead on a dollars per acre revenue. When you add together the economic benefits and the social impact benefits, to me that gets to be a pretty easy decision.